You happy? Hello everyone, thank you for being here tonight. I am Hannah Miller, I work for ITV News, and I assume you all know who Andy is beside me. Thank you also for taking everyone's questions. It's great to be back. It's the first one of these I've done for a while, certainly the first one since the pandemic, and it's really nice to have an audience both here in person and on the screen. Hello to you there in your homes. You're all welcome to take part, so if you're listening virtually, please do put your hand up. Anyone in the audience will try to take questions as we go along. We've selected some of them too. If I'm looking at my phone, that's because I'm seeing some of the questions on there. It's not because I'm being rude. And the hashtag is AskAndyGM. I think with that, we can get started.
Yeah.
So, do we have Sarah Shepherdson in the room? No. Do we have David Mowbray in the room? David? No? Okay, right. I'm just going to take the first question that is on, or do we have John Fitton?
Yes.
John, let's go with you.
Hi, John.
My question's about policing in the local area. I live in Chadderton, a borough of Oldham, and I believe we have a bit of an issue with crime, and I believe that we don't have enough police officers in the area. I understand that GMP have around about 250 officers per 100,000 head of population in Greater Manchester, and Chadderton has 4 police officers, and we have a population of around about 35,000. So my question is, do you feel that 4 police officers is enough to protect 35,000 people? And if not, what is being done to improve policing in the area and reduce the crime levels that we have?
Yeah, well, thanks, John. And evening, everybody. Thanks for coming out. I mean, that's a question I guess a lot of people will have on their mind, so it's a good question to start with. Do I think it's enough, you asked me? No. We'd like more, and we are recruiting more. So since I came in 2017, we have been recruiting more police officers. So in every year, I say we have, you've helped us. Obviously, we've had to go to the council tax to do that. But we have recruited more in every year. And what we did last year, so that you had transparency over the numbers in your ward, was we asked GMP, myself and the Deputy Mayor, to introduce a system of named PCs and PCSOs. In fact, the new Chief Constable's taking it further, and there's the whole of your team now is visible, if you like, on ward by ward on the GMP website. And we'll be recruiting more this year. So no is the answer, but we are doing our best to rectify the cuts that we face. And we did face big cuts. But the reason I'm not going to say it's all about that in terms of the quality of policing in Greater Manchester, the culture wasn't right internally either. And without going through all the details, it's why we believed that there was a need for a change of leadership, which we put in place this time last year. And I think it's the combination of more resources on the ground together with a different way of policing Greater Manchester. And I don't know if you're familiar with the statements that the new chief has made, but he's talked of doubling the number of arrests. If you look at the number of people arrested in Greater Manchester, it is much lower, actually, than comparable city regions. And it's about a more proactive form of policing. And I am beginning to see it really coming through now on the ground. All burglaries, household burglaries being attended in person, all crimes investigated. We have a meeting in Oldham on Friday, which is our first police public accountability meeting, which is intended to improve the scrutiny and the visibility of all of these issues. And we'll present figures that show there are green shoots, if you like, in terms of GMP moving things in a better direction than they were. But I don't think any of us are going to come here tonight and say we are where we want to be, because there's a lot more to do. In terms of Chadderton, I just believe it or not, been in the McDonald's there on the way just stopping off on the way back from Leeds. And I just picked up concerns there, just people came up to me, so I know there's a real concern, which I'm going to talk to the Deputy Chief Constable who's here tonight. Terry Woods is here together with Chris Bowen, who's your new Chief Superintendent in the borough as well, because what we've tried to do is reverse some of the centralisation of Greater Manchester Police, which have been going on for the last pretty much the last decade, really, since the cut started. We've taken a decision to put resources back into the boroughs, and I will be discussing the Chadderton situation, because I've just picked up some stuff that we need to take a proper look at. Although there've been, and we're aware of ongoing stuff around burglary in the area as well. So I hope that gives you a direct answer. I'm trying to answer your question exactly in the way that it deserves to be answered. I think we may have slightly more than what you said. If you look at the team on Chadderton, I think it's 5. But if you're going to say to me that's enough, then I'm going to say no, it's not. And we need more. And we are still in the process of recruiting more, and more will be recruited in the coming year.
It's impressive that you didn't know the number of 5 off the top of your head, but I think the fifth that I didn't count, and perhaps wrongly so, was a PCSO. So I was considering we have an inspector, a sergeant, and 2 constables.
Only go with warranted officers, which is fair enough. Terry, do you want to? I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that, Terry, because it's helpful.
Terry Woods, note the slight Lancashire accent, because where I've come from, the last job. Next to me is Chris, and I'll pass on to him, Andy, for a second, if you don't mind. But I'd sort of say a couple of things from Force point of view, just to echo some of the things that Andy said. So the first one is the good news for this year, that we're growing by 450 police officers in the year April to April, this April coming, which is the 3rd year of that national uplift that you've probably seen in the press. We can do a lot with 450 extra officers. The second thing that I would say is that, and the fact Chris is sat next to me as a new divisional commander, is both the Chief and I come from a heritage of neighbourhood policing. Check our records, that's what we do, check Lancashire and other places. It's in our DNA. We've brought in a different system straight away, which is we've invested in a lot of extra district commanders. So you've got very senior people now at a very local level who are entrusted and empowered. We run in that area. I'll let Chris touch on the Chadderton side of things. And just to echo, you're talking, and rightly, around neighbourhood resources. Clearly, we're a big force. There's response teams that cover that area on top of different resources. But our aim is neighbourhood. Check our track record from other places. That's what we're about. And sort of assurance from me. It's our DNA, and that's the DNA that GMP will be developing, no doubt. I'll just let Chris touch on Chadderton, because he's your local one.
Yes, good afternoon. I'm Chris Bowen, I'm District Commander at Oldham. Been here about 8 weeks now. Chadderton, I am aware of the concerns. I can just tell you some of the activity that's going on there at the moment. So we're currently in a week of action around the burglary situation there, extra resources on overnight. I can tell you that recently the group that's been unfortunately stealing a lot of the motor vehicles, we have arrested and charged those individuals, and we've put them where they should be, behind bars, in line with, as Andy described, the increase in arrests. I can give you reassurance that in October, Oldham arrested 235 people. That's the most they've arrested in 1 month, in any month in the last 2 years. So it goes to show that we are putting people out on the streets. We are hitting the criminals where it hurts, but it takes time. I'm not belittling the issues that are in Chadderton. There are a number of issues there, but we've got a number of live investigations taking place there, and hopefully we'll be taking some more arrests and more charges soon, which will hopefully give some more reassurance to the communities there. So we're making progress, but bear with us, because we can't solve everything overnight. But anything specific, feel free to contact me directly, send it through, and I promise I'll have a look at it for you.
I think I may just add a little bit more. It's reassuring what you've said, and I think, excuse me, I think the force would probably do well to advertise what you've just told us, because I think a lot of people in the area, all they see is those black and white figures of there are 4 or 5 officers in the area, and it's well known that there hardly does seem to be any police. So if there are response units, as you say, that come and help out as and when needed. And if there are a number of arrests being made and good work's being done, then it would be good to publicise that. Because at the moment, you can't even find stats on crime because GMP is having some kind of IT issue where they're not being able to publish them. So the numbers you've just quoted at me of 200 and odd arrests, I don't know where that could be found by a general member of the public like me.
No, it's a fair challenge. And that's what Friday's about, to be honest, that public accountability and the ability for councillors and MPs all over, it's going to be live streamed, to challenge at that ward level, which hasn't been there before. And I was a Greater Manchester MP for a long time before taking on the role as mayor, and I'll just be honest and say I always would challenge on these issues as an MP, because I don't think the culture's been right in GMP for a long time, if I'm being very honest with you. And as you've just heard from the Deputy Chief, the two of them, the Deputy and the Chief, embody a very different approach to policing. I don't think we've had it before. Maybe one of our Chief Constables going back 10, 15 years ago, but certainly not in recent times. And it's about numbers, you're right, to challenge on that, but it is also about culture, isn't it? What is the general approach? Is it a case of when you go to report something, you get, oh, well, yeah, we can't do everything, and why are you telling us? And, we'll get back to you at some point. Or is it a slightly more proactive approach, where the people who are telling it are interested in going and arresting people? And I think there's just a total culture change coming through. I will probably feel it before you, but if I was sitting here this time next year and you said there's no change, then I'd be very worried. And in fact, the Chief himself has said he won't, if he doesn't deliver the change, then he won't stay around. He's there to make change happen, and and we'll all be held accountable for that.
Does anyone else have any questions on GMP particularly? Now's the time. Here we go.
Thank you. You've been in charge for over 4 years now. Do you not take any responsibility for the state of GMP being in special measures? The lack of policing on the streets. It's not just suddenly happened overnight. The crime's building up. We've got a problem where you can read the Oldham Times. Machete attacks, cars being stolen, burglaries, as you said. You can't just turn around and say, oh, well, we've now suddenly got the resources, happy days, we've got the police arresting people. What have you been doing for the past 4 years?
So it's fair challenge. And of course, I do. I'm ultimately accountable, if you like, for all the decisions that I make. I don't run the police, and it's really important to keep saying this. If I did, we'd be in Russia or somewhere else. I don't. We do not tell the police where to go, what to do. They are operationally independent. So my job, the job you've got to test me on, is holding them to account on behalf of you. It's not.
Do you feel you've done that adequately over the last 4 years?
I do, and let me explain why. Because it's a difficult thing to, Bev's here as well, and we've done it together. So one of the first things I did, and this was in days of taking office, was commission a wide-ranging review of child sexual exploitation in Greater Manchester, which is ongoing, and I can get back to the specifics on Oldham if people want to know about that.
I'll ask you about that in a second. We'll come on to that in a second.
So that was within days of taking office, and it followed my hearing Maggie Oliver on the radio talking about events in Manchester prompted by the Three Girls programme. And I brought in the reviewers who were highly regarded and had conducted the Rotherham inquiry to begin a major process of external review. And that is me doing my job of holding the force to account. Now, with that, I can go into more detail if you want, but the process of that has kind of, in many ways, revealed some of the culture that I've just been describing to John in response to his. Let me just answer, but you by all means come back when I've finished. But simultaneously, obviously, we had the attack at the Manchester Arena. And so what you had was a police force that had been weakened by cuts between 2010 and 2017. Then there was the Arena attack, which caused a massive sense of shock around the force and drew in a huge amount of effort and resources, but combined with this external scrutiny I was doing. And the role that you have to do is both balance being a support to the force, because that's our role as well. We can't allow our police force just to go into, just be constantly undermined. But you have to challenge and support at the same time. And it's a difficult, if I'm honest, it's a difficult thing to do. However, we have pursued that process and it is ongoing. And it has revealed a lot that needed to change within the force, particularly around openness. There was a lack of openness around difficult issues, Hannah. Stuff, not the full story not being told to us. And again, we've established more and more of that. We brought in, IT was mentioned. We brought in HMIC to look at the IT system. Again, that revealed a similar picture. And then finally, building this picture, bear in mind the powers that I have are kind of limited over the police force, but quite, if you like, extreme, in that the only real power I've got is change leadership. So, balancing all the things that the force had been through, in the end, I decided to use that power this time last year.
Does that answer your question?
Well, it does and it doesn't, because you've just gone round the hours about what you've done after the fact.
Well, you asked me what I've done.
No, hang on. After the fact. It's taken the force to go into special measures for something to be done. Maggie Oliver hasn't been complimentary about what you've done, in all fairness, Mr. Mayor. She's been quite scathing about what you've done. And I think people in Oldham and elsewhere, perhaps in Greater Manchester, want to know, what more are you going to be able to do? Are you going to essentially do what the North Yorkshire's PCC's done? He said something, disgusting, and he fell on his sword. Are you going to get to a point, if GMP doesn't gain that place, that you'll fall on your sword?
Well, I don't think what you just said is entirely true, in that when the first stage of the child sexual exploitation report was published, Maggie Oliver was there at the publication of that report on Operation Augusta. And I'm not going to say everything that she said, but she praised us for having commissioned that report. And I wouldn't dismiss it. I mean, you're kind of implying that that's it's not an easy thing to do. We heard things that were wrong and we challenged the force, and that report was published, and it was praised by the victim's grandmother and Maggie Oliver. Now we're working on the second stage of the review, and again we are going to ensure that process is followed through. So I have a job to do, which is holding Greater Manchester Police Force to account, which is what I have been doing. It has been made difficult at times by the culture of the force, as was, in that we weren't always given the full picture. But how do we react to that? Well, we change the leadership, and that's what we've done. Now, very much, yeah, absolutely. You hold me to account at the next election if the things I was saying to John a moment ago haven't come through. But if you look at my record, there are more police officers on the street. Forget the government money, because we'd done it before then. We started putting police officers on the street. And you cannot say that GMP's kind of position was not affected by massive cuts that they underwent from 2010. They were huge. Sorry?
So did the rest of the country.
No, there's a point you need to understand about that. Greater Manchester Police is more dependent on central government grant than police forces in other parts of the country. Why? Because our council tax base doesn't raise as much money as more affluent parts of the country. In fact, most other cities have, apart from, let's say, some of the northern cities, Birmingham, the West Midlands, London, they raise more from their council tax base than we are able to. So when government cuts come along, we get hit harder because we are more dependent on central government grant.
I said we'd come on to the CSE report. We did have a question sent in about it, which essentially was, when is the long overdue Oldham CSE report going to come out? So let's talk about that.
Yeah, so it's the second stage review, and the review team were making good progress on it. I should say, by the way, it was commissioned by Oldham Council originally, the leadership of Oldham Council, into allegations that had been made, and I agreed to ask our review team to take on board the Oldham review, and that was done. They were disrupted by the pandemic. So the work that they were trying to do was, I'm afraid, delayed by the pandemic, as were so many other things. But the report had gone into its final stages, and a final draft had been put forward. In that time, an issue has arisen which requires QC advice. So there has been a delay, an unforeseen delay, and also the report has to go to people who are named in the report. And obviously it's hard to put a time frame on that because you enter...
So are we still talking about the end of the year or not really?
Well, now this is just where it gets a little complicated because we have to take advice actually from people who act for victims as well. So Maggie will be one of them, but the Sexual Assault Referral Centre, St Mary's as well, are helping advise myself and the Deputy Mayor. And we had this with the Augusta report actually, because if you look back, I can't remember the exact date, Hannah, but I'm thinking it was published in about mid-January 2019.
Yeah, vaguely.
Yeah, it was something like that. And there was a reason why, which is that we were advised not to publish a report of this nature in December because of the time of year, and often the call from victims is that it's not published at that time with Christmas coming. So to get to directly answering your question, we believe now that it will be better to publish in the new year, and the week commencing the 24th of January is the week that we have now agreed with all parties for the publication. And it's a frustration in that we'd said, and the leader of Oldham Council had said, all of us, we want to get this out, and we'd wanted to get it out this month. But at the same time, given the nature of what's in it, we can't kind of cut across due process. We can't publish a report that factually will fall, won't stand scrutiny. It has to be done properly, and hence, we are running into December now because of this issue that it's arisen that we need to take QC advice upon, and then falls into the Christmas period, and the advice is that we don't publish for the sake of victims at that time. So the week of the 24th of January is a direct and honest answer as to where we are.
Okay, we had, lady there.
It's my question originally. Can I ask then, if you're publishing it on the 24th of January, and you're saying that the delays are because there are people in it that have to see it, are you saying then that there are things in that report that really seriously need action taken, and will action be properly taken on that?
So, obviously, I can't go into the details of what the report says, but when I commissioned it, the review team are the most highly regarded in the country. So there's no kind of sense here that they come in and they do a job that, it's been a really challenging process. And actually, I think they've come up against at times, delays that were frustration for me and the Deputy Mayor that they shouldn't have done. And that, as I said, that has flushed issues out as we've gone through this process. But no, there are individuals named, and those individuals need to be contacted because that's due process. So any public inquiry, we're running to the same standards as would be a public inquiry where letters, people have to be given a chance to answer what's in the draft. But this process will be completed, and as we said with Augusta, every aspect of it will be followed up properly, every aspect. And actually, if you look at what happened there, the original allegations against individuals concerned with the treatment of Victoria Byrne, which was the original situation, the cases were reopened, and there's a whole huge review team was set up in GMP that is now looking concurrently at all of these issues and going back historically as well. So nothing will be ignored, nothing at all.
I think the only thing that people in Oldham are concerned about is put forward to ask you to include Oldham in your when you were looking at it was the limited years that they didn't go far enough or far back enough to include well-known historic incidences that wouldn't have been picked up.
Well, obviously, I mean, received the request and we agreed to it, and we've not had any. Well, I don't think we've had that from the review team, though. You know, they have, as I say, they are forensic, they are thorough, they do a full job, and you'll have to reserve judgment yourself until you see the report. But the fact that we've done it and are doing it with the seriousness that we are doing it, and we did with Manchester, and bear in mind, you know, people like to kind of sometimes maybe suggest that none of this is easy for anybody, but we're doing it and we're following it through. And that's the culture change I was talking about before. I'm serious about it. You know.
How has it been going on for so many years then? Why has it got to this stage? It's been going on for many years.
The review.
The grooming gangs. They've been going on for years.
Well, that's why, you know, obviously we've commissioned the review, but it's not just that there's a review going on that's like a paper exercise. The force is set up. I've been terrible. Correct me if I get the numbers wrong, but or Deputy Mayor's here as well. 350 strong unit.
Why was it not stopped in 2013 when it came to light?
But that's why the review was set up. If you let me answer the question, that's why the review was set up. Maggie Oliver.
But it's still going on.
If I could just answer, Maggie Oliver said that there was a review ongoing, Operation Augusta, in Manchester in 2005, and it was stood down without any explanation overnight. So that was her original allegation that I heard on the radio, and it was on the back of that allegation that I set up the review. And initially the review was into that Operation Augusta, and into Operation Span, which was the subject of the Three Girls programme in Rochdale. So that was the original review. And so, but you asked me the reason why it's been allowed to go on so long. Basically, the first report, if you've read it, the Operation Augusta report, reveals that it wasn't a priority at the time for the force. But that's the point of the review. We said, well, we're not accepting that, and we want a culture change within the force. That was the whole point of commissioning the review.
So are you going to let political correctness not run the report? Because that is one of the biggest factors in all this. From the Oldham riots 20 years ago now is political correctness. Now, I heard you saying you're going to get more police. Are you going to vet them police properly? Because at the moment, police don't have a good record nationally. They're full of sex offenders and stuff like that. PC Rigby, PC O'Connell assaulted a woman in Manchester. I'll accept police, but they've got to be vetted properly. They've got to be right for the job. That's got to be the priority. And nationally, that's coming out in the papers that the police have failed. But political correctness it affects a lot of the inquiries that we've had, not just here in Oldham, Manchester, Rotherham, Bradford. Are you going to take that out of the equation? If you take that out of the equation, we'll get a good inquiry. But if that's in the equation, then the inquiry is no good.
Well, so a couple of things I would say to that. Now, I understand where you're coming from, and Terry might want to answer the point about the vetting of new recruits, which is a fair question, because I'm aware of some of the instances that you're mentioning. So that's a fair question. But from my point of view about political correctness, well, I wouldn't have commissioned the review if that was my motivation, would I? I mean, I wouldn't have done it because, as I say, it's not been easy. When you shine a spotlight on things in the past, it's never easy, and there are people who'd rather that didn't happen. But I've never done that in my political career. I reopened Hillsborough for the same reason, because I don't believe you should ever just say, "Oh well, you put a lid on that and you move on." If people are still asking questions, those questions need to be answered. And actually, that review, I thought it might reveal that they stopped the Manchester inquiry because of reasons of political correctness, but actually that wasn't what came through, because it was the real paperwork they looked at. It wasn't. They weren't just looking at they looked at all the papers. It was a question of priorities. Young women, girls reporting sexual abuse were not treated with the seriousness, the respect that they deserved in that period of time. Their experience, care leavers weren't. It was almost like they were just, you can't trust them. That was a part of the culture. So all I can say to you is no. And if you look at the reviewers, I don't know if you've looked into this review team and what they've done, I don't think anyone in Rotherham would accuse them of that, of pulling their punches. And I worked closely with Sarah Champion, who was the local MP there, who was heavily involved in the exposure of Rotherham. So we've learned from all of that, and this is why our review, I say you'll wait to read it, but it's a painful process, but it's an absolutely essential process, and nothing should be flinched from. All of it has to be kind of faced up to, and then all the consequences dealt with, and that's what we're doing.
Can I just ask, is there or will there be a dedicated team for this particular thing? Because it's obviously a big thing, and it needs a dedicated team to look into it and to stick with it.
You mean to look at the outcomes from the review, you mean?
I don't know whether Bev might say something about...
Looking at child sexual exploitation and, criminal activities and everything involved, it needs a dedicated team. It can't be just somebody from here, somebody from there.
No, you're right,
It needs some people who know people and who will... Who
are expert in
yeah.
it. Yeah, absolutely. And we've got that set up now, but maybe the Deputy Mayor might say something more about that. But you're absolutely right. Specialist unit, and we've got one now. And that was a big product of the first report, a recognition that we didn't have that expertise in one place, one team within GMP. But that has been one of the things that we've done since. But Terry, do you want to pick up the vetting point?
Yeah. So there's a number of issues there on the vetting side. Absolutely legitimate points of view. And I think this is the benefit and why myself and the Chief, not just in this force, in our past forces, come to things like this, so you can challenge us, because they're legitimate challenges. Now, as part of the reinvigoration and review of GMP that we're currently doing, one aspect is vetting. So vetting directly reports into me as the deputy. Not many departments do, because I run the force, but vetting is so important around our ethics, our standards and our values. It comes into me, and as part of the reviews that we're doing, I've already increased the number of people. Well, I say number of people, we've increased the number of jobs we're recruiting, so that we have a bolstered vetting unit. And one of those reasons is what I've said before, through local money, national money, we are going to be increasing the numbers in GMP significantly. So we've got to get it right. You get one chance. That's on the vetting. On just touching on the CSE teams, and pass over to yourself, Bev. Again, you're speaking to a guy that set the CSE team up in Blackpool a number of years ago. So I've got a history in relation to what I think is one of the most important areas of not just policing but life and society. Absolutely, CSE is one of the core priorities, and myself and the Chief have been really clear on that already. Along with violence against women, some very, very important issues at the minute in society that we're absolutely zoning in on. But we already have, through various funding mechanisms, particularly the Deputy Mayor and the Mayor, we already have now in place, prior to us coming, established CSE team. What we need to do is look at what happens in districts, because actually a lot of this comes from neighbourhoods, and neighbourhood policing. And I go back to my first point, it's not just about expert teams, it's about what footprint we have in neighbourhoods, because those local officers are the eyes and ears of things that are much bigger. So, Bev, do you want us to pass on to yourself, to the Deputy Mayor?
Thanks. Good evening, everybody. I can't say how important it is to both Andy and myself that the issue of child sexual exploitation is dealt with properly. My background's in probation and working with children and young people. It's actually central to what I think my job is about. So, in terms of those of you expressing concern about that, you're pushing completely at an open door, because that's what we want as well. Two things. In terms of some of the historic abuse, and Andy's talked about the Augusta report, it is absolutely clear that at that time, 15, 20 years ago, this issue was not taken seriously. And actually not just by the police, but the children that the review team followed up and examined that were in the case studies for Augusta. They were, almost all of them, they were children who are in care. They were living in residential homes. The social workers knew what was happening to them, and indeed, in some instances, facilitated the access of these men to those young women in residential homes. So this was rife through the professional groups that should have been protecting children, and that was absolutely wrong. So where are we now? In terms of cases that arise now, I'm not going to say that everything is perfect, because it does come down in the first instance, when a report is made, it'll come down to one of the neighbourhood police officers going out to do that initial investigation. And not all of those police officers are experts in this very difficult area. So I'm very conscious, and I do know of cases that have come to me where we haven't got those first steps right. But to try and address that in cases coming through now, as Terry said, we funded a specialist team. It's 150 strong. It's on the back of the Augusta report, because we established a special operation called Green Jacket on that to follow through those cases, because it was clear it wasn't just the cases in the study that had been failed, it was other children as well. So we've established this team, and that team will deal with the most difficult cases, and it will also oversee the work that's done on the districts in similar cases. But we are still getting a large number of historic cases coming through, and they have to be investigated. At any one time, we have across Greater Manchester, I'm really sorry to say, hundreds of these investigations. Absolutely hundreds. And that is the extent. This is another epidemic, actually, in terms of the abuse of our children. And that is what the police are up against. We now, however, have a multi-agency approach. It's not just the police. It's the social services department. It's the health department. It's schools and education. And they're all working together now in a way that wasn't happening 20 years ago. So, things are much better now. We're going to make sure they get even better. But we still have these historic cases to deal with. And where we uncover things that weren't done properly, we will pursue them. That is what we have done. And we won't shy away from that at all. And I think the new leadership we've now got in GMP are with us in that. They won't shy away from it either. We have had, Andy and I, very great difficulty bringing these issues forward. There's obviously been a lot of resistance with the leadership of some of the organisations we've been scrutinising, the former leadership of GMP, some of the councils didn't want this scrutiny, but we've persisted, and we will continue to persist.
Right.
Yep. No.
I do want to just say I want to move on from this topic in a second, because we have spent quite a lot of time on it. But last question.
Very important what I've got
Yeah,
to say.
go on.
Forget historic. What about present day? I made a report to the police, and it's about 3-4 months ago. I've never been interviewed. I had a funny type of phone interview where I thought it was me that was being investigated, and I was promised that an officer would come. He didn't come. I phoned 101, asked why I hadn't been interviewed in this very serious matter, and I was told there's no officers available. Now, this has gone on for months and months and months. The last text I got was, and this is after this funny type of interview, the last text I got, I was told it's been referred to the local team. And I would be contacted in due course. I've spoke to a member of the local team, and he knows nothing about it. Okay. So my question about this, it's not my question I've come for. My question on this is, why have I not been interviewed if this is about what's happening now? Not historic, what's happening now?
Okay.
So again, fair question. It's difficult to talk personally about the specific incidents, but if you hang fire and grab myself and Chris after, we'll have a chat to you and we'll make sure you get follow-up.
I mean, just to come in, I mean, bear in mind, we're not where we need to be. So, no one's going to. We're not saying that we are. Things we think are now moving in the right direction, but cases like yours, and Terry's just said he will follow it up. We still pick them up. We pick them up from organisations that we work with, and we do work with Maggie's organisation, by the way, and we pick up information from there. We hear about cases that are not being handled well, and that helps us go back to Chief Constable Steve Watson or to Terry and say, we've picked up and that's what we're doing. So the culture change isn't uniform across everywhere in the organisation, but as we find out about things that are still not being done right, we are challenging the system, and that is how you get the improvement that we need. So it's a journey that we're on. These issues are, probably not handled perfectly by any police force. You've got to prioritise it, number one, and as Bev said, we've done that. And then you've got to empower the leadership to deal with it in the right way, and we've done that as well. And hopefully, as Bev just said, I mean, Bev acknowledged actually in her comments that we still get examples where it comes to a local team and it doesn't get passed on in the right way. I don't know whether your case is one of those examples. It might be, but we will always follow it up, and that's the point of tonight. So you can come here and say what you've said, and then we will follow it up.
Okay.
When I spoke to the officer over the phone, it sort of came over that a negative approach to it, and because there was no pornography, no adults messing about with the children, it was sort of dismissed. But I told him, my opinion is it's a marketplace for kids.
I think at this point we should probably.
When I tell this officer, he'll understand where I'm coming from.
I don't want to sort of interrupt and cut things off, but I think because it's quite a specific case that you're talking about, I think it probably makes sense for you guys to have a conversation afterwards. And I'm glad you've been able to raise it, but we should probably move on because we've spent quite a lot of time dealing with this kind of issue. And we do have, I think Gary in the virtual audience has a sort of policing-ish related question that's not quite the same.
Yeah, so all I'm going to say basically, yesterday, 2 double trams on the Berry line were taken out of service because of vandalism, smashed windows. Disgraceful.
Yeah. Shall I answer, Gary?
In terms of, are you worried about the sort of tackling antisocial behaviour like that? Is that your concern?
Well, it's just, this is the type of thing that happens all the time. Every single day, there's vandalism right across the Metro line. Radcliffe, Whitefield, Presses, the same story every single day.
Yeah, it is a challenge, and it's a reason why we increased the number of police officers dedicated to the transport system. Again, we did that in the last couple of years. But you're right, there are certain hotspots on the system where you get repeated antisocial behaviour and criminal damage of trams, and it's another area where we're not where we need to be, and we've asked Terry actually to lead a bit of a review of actually more than just the policing of the transport system, just transport policing more broadly, because I personally don't think in recent times we have done enough on speeding, for instance. I don't think we've done enough on driving without insurance. It feels as though those issues were deprioritised again by the previous leadership, and we've asked the new leadership to prioritise policing of transport, and that review is ongoing at the moment, because Terry was with us a couple of weeks ago where we've been putting out our thoughts on that. I think you can already see it. I saw on Regent Road a couple of mornings ago, GMP were there in force. I was in Stockport and I was driving back into Manchester a couple of weeks ago. There was a huge operation in place along the A6. There is some change that's beginning to happen, and hopefully you'll see it on the Metrolink as well, a more forceful response when we're seeing this kind of repeated vandalism, which we're not prepared to accept.
Does anyone else have anything to say on antisocial behaviour, particularly?
Good evening, Andy. Shamraji here again. We have met. I want to touch up on the neighbouring town in Rochdale, because on the taxi issue, NPHTA work for association, I get phone calls every day, and I've been on week last Friday, BBC Breakfast as well, regarding crime and attacks on the taxis. A gentleman on the 30th of October on Queensway, Terry, was, you're probably aware of that, and he was attacked. And that gentleman in Salford Royal, he died last week. What has the police done? Because his family, he's only been here not long. He's got one brother who lives in Rochdale. He's been in touch with me, our association, that there was no investigation. Because our association contacted the police, and that's why the association has gone ahead. And before that, there was nothing happening, and nobody knew anything about it, and the gentleman has died. We don't know when his funeral is going to be, and there's attacks in Greater Manchester, like that gentleman said in Redcliffe, Whitefield, even last night, taxi were attacked, the car was broken, the window was smashed, the windscreen was pressed. I have spoken to the chief last week on BBC GMR, which you attend that show, and he agreed, and he said, yes, the taxi drivers are attacked, and there's nothing being done, and that needs to be, it's very important, because we already got a shortage of taxi drivers in the country, so which is very important, that because they're frightened to work, Andy, and Terry, please, could you look into that, and we need a support from the police on this issue.
Well, I think maybe Terry could say something on the specific, sounds a sad case. I think the ones I was referring to, the Chatterton cases before, some of those were, I think, targeted at Uber drivers or taxi drivers. And I think, from what Chris was saying before, I think that related to some of the arrests maybe that you've mentioned, Chris. Is that right? So that's acknowledged that obviously there is a very serious issue, and the case you described sounds incredibly so. But Terry.
That happened on 30th of October. That gentleman was attacked by two people. They have been, which I read the media, even in news all the time, I'm linked, and they have been arrested, and there are investigations going, but the investigation now only started because of our association got intervened, and we contacted the police, and that's why the investigation has started.
Right.
I think, again, it's difficult to start commenting on kind of specific issues. So, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I'm just touching on a couple of things. So, first of all, I'll go straight, because, that's such a tragic case. I won't go into the exact nature, but you're right in that there are people that we have identified and are being dealt with for that awful incident. I think in the broader round transport, so in relation to, and I know I listened to the interview as well on GMR, absolutely the taxis are crucial to the economy, no doubt about it. They also help us all, let's be honest, of the night time. Without taxis there would be far more issues on the street, and we're very grateful to the service. It is something that both the Chief and I are very alive to and very supportive of, and the likes of yourself and other associations more than happy to get engaged and get involved with. I think on the broader side of roads and transport, one thing that struck me coming here is outside of London, I don't know of anywhere else that has had the investment of dedicated transport officers for the tram network, which is a good thing. What we've done in the first 8 weeks of being here is we've made sure that they are actually ring-fenced to the transport network. And I think probably in the past they've not been as ring-fenced as the sort of steer that we've given, and therefore you won't have seen as much presence, and COVID, etc., has impacted on that. So what I can assure you, and it's already done, is that the transport unit are dedicated, and Bob's here from transport. He and I talk on a regular basis in relation to that. But we will be going further, and we've got a series of reviews on at the minute, as the Mayor's said. I have some very strong views in relation to safety on the roads. It does feel different here than other places, and I think we need to look at investing a significant extra resource into transport to support the economy, support the public.
And I'm going to say something that's not popular. I think we need more speed cameras because if you look at Lancashire where you were before, there are more than we have, and we've not reviewed them for a long time, and that needs to change. And I know that's not a vote winner there, is there? But that can bring the resources that can be reinvested in transport policing.
Yeah. Let's talk about transport a bit more broadly. We did have a lot of questions. I think Sarah, who sent one in, isn't here. But does anyone have? There were a lot of questions about rail lines, in particular, transport more broadly.
Not sure about little girls.
It's all right.
Yeah. My concern was Oldham's only heavy rail station at Greenfield on the main Manchester to Leeds line. The local rail group, with the support of Transport for Greater Manchester, we've met with you, Andy, in the past. The consultation had a recommendation that there should be a half-hourly service at Greenfield and Mosley and the other two stations throughout the day in the original options B and C. But your option B plus is actually B minus for us because the recommendation from GMCA that must be retained seems to have been dropped from the latest consultation. So my question really is, did you know that it was going to be dropped? And can you put your weight behind making sure that recommendations in options B and C for a half-hourly service at Greenfield and Mosley actually takes place?
So we strongly support what you say, and you know that because we've always said we want a half-hourly service throughout the day at Greenfield, given the area, the catchment that it's serving. So it's not my option B plus. What happened was we called for that when the train operators and Network Rail were consulting on the new timetable, and they went out to consultation on it, but not able to deliver it. And the frustration was they had to change their options because they consulted options that couldn't be delivered, which was embarrassing, I think, on the rail industry's part. And hence, they had to then come back to us and remove services from the time. Well, they had to propose removal services from the timetable. So it wasn't what we wanted at all, to be honest with you. This has been a debacle ever since May 2018 when that new timetable came in. The issue is the lack of capacity in central Manchester, and I have raised this so many times. Castlefield Corridor and platforms 15 and 16 at Piccadilly, that is essential investment to free up the whole of the rail network in our area, and the government just hasn't done it. They put in the Oldham Cord, but they didn't put in the rest of the investment needed to let trains go freely through central Manchester. Constantly they're all queuing and it causes the congestion, and that's why that option B plus has had to come forward. And we all objected to it, saying you're giving us a reduced timetable, but you're not putting in the infrastructure that's needed to get us back to a full timetable. And that's the unsatisfactory nature of the position that we find ourselves in.
I understand all that about Castlefield service, but for Greenfield and all that area catchment, what you've said doesn't really make sense in that our trains don't go to Castlefield, they only go to Piccadilly. They're running in the peak period and stopping at our train stations. The East Coast Mainline consultation actually put a detailed timetable showing that the extra train that stopped during the peak could hold to Manchester in under 2 hours. It doesn't make sense that it can't run during the day.
No, the point is there's congestion at Victoria as well, but it's as they come through Victoria and then they go round the Oldham Cord, it's feeding more trains into Manchester than Manchester can cope with. There's a bottleneck at Victoria, there's a bottleneck on the Castlefield corridor. It's all connected though, and it's all about the number of... Well, you're shaking your head, but it's just a fact, I'm afraid. There's too many trains being fed into central Manchester than central Manchester has got the infrastructure to cope with. Hence...
I would agree totally if our trains went to Victoria or round the Oldham Curve or use platform Oxford Road 15, 16. They don't. They can run it in the peaks. It does not make sense for the rest.
You've got a twice hourly service in the peak, but it's in the off-peak is what they're saying. They have to... So all I'm saying to you is that was the best compromise we could get given the fact that they had to remove services from the timetable. And the point is, if you follow what happens on the rail system, the delays build up as the day goes on. This is the point. As more trains come in and more trains get delayed in Manchester, the thing gets worse throughout the working day. It knocks on and it knocks on to every service. And the disruption often gets worse through the evening peak. And that's why they were talking about removing services from the off-peak peak time to free up the timetable. It's not ideal. The only thing that solves it is the infrastructure to cope with the number of trains that we should be running for a city region like ours. And so far, the government and Network Rail have refused to put that infrastructure in. And that's where I've been today at Transport for the North, arguing for the right rail infrastructure for the north of England, because we haven't got it to support the aspirations that we have for your area, but we have for everywhere, which is a much better train service than the one we've got.
Let's go to the little person at the back who's waited incredibly patiently.
Hi.
Hiya.
My question is, why are schools still up, and is it really safe? As a lot of students have been getting COVID-19 since the start of my school year, up to 4 students in my classroom have gotten COVID-19 and have been off. And 3 teachers have been off with COVID-19, and I'm wondering whether it's actually safe to go there or not, because people are still getting COVID-19, and is it just not helping?
It's a very good question. Do you feel more should be done in terms of people wearing masks or that kind of thing? Or?
I'm not sure because people are still getting COVID-19, but I don't think masks are actually helping. I don't think it's doing anything.
Well, there was a report out this week, I don't know if you saw it, I think it came from, it was the World Health Organization, that said that masks are the most effective thing because COVID-19 is a virus that generally gets transmitted when people sneeze or, and the droplets go out into the air. And what we've agreed with people to pick up what you're saying, in every area, every council, the Director of Public Health can work with a school to say if there's a lot of cases in one school, those schools then can put in measures to protect the kids. So, we keep a very close watch on all of these things. And we're looking at, we've got leader of Oldham Council here tonight. The Director of Public Health in this borough will be looking at all the case rates in all of the schools. And actually, if one of the schools gets to a point where everyone's like, ooh, that might be a bit too high, then we might ask people to wear masks, windows open. Nobody would ever, so don't feel unsafe because people are watching and, obviously all of the information says that people of your age are less likely to become very unwell if you get COVID-19. Now that's not to say we don't take it seriously, of course we do. But, where things get too bad, people will step in and take measures. Obviously the main one is to send people home, but we've got to keep you learning as well, and we're conscious that we don't want to take people out of school if we don't need to. But I think we've got a good grip on these things in Greater Manchester, and obviously your safety matters more to us than anything else, and we would never do anything that was going to put that at risk.
Do we have Leander Neild here? Hello. Should we come to you next?
I work in schools as well, so I'll talk about that bit in a minute.
I thought there might be a link.
Yeah, there is. Okay. So, hi, Andy. I'm Leander.
Hi, Leander.
So, kind of I work in one of the Greater Manchester Child and Adolescent Mental Health Services. So, before the pandemic, obviously, CAMS services were struggling. There was long waiting lists, struggling to recruit and retrain staff. Since the pandemic, there has been kind of an absolute pandemic in terms of mental health.
Yeah.
Not only have we got the children that have been waiting for quite a number of months to access support, we've also got a massive increase in new referrals to CAMS services. I work within mental health in schools, so we've seen a massive sort of increase in those early intervention referrals, and there is some funding in Manchester in terms of the mental health support teams in schools, which is brilliant, and that's quite limited and it's sort of being phased in. But generally, the whole of CAMS services are really struggling. Working in schools, I'm also seeing the impact on teacher mental health. So it was interesting about you saying about schools being closed, because again, what we noticed is that the impact on children and young people's mental health of not actually having that structure and not having that sort of that connection and that enjoyment with their friends had greatly impacted. So for us, from a mental health perspective, it's helpful to have that back in place. Obviously, the COVID side of things are still there, and that's a worry for a lot of young people. So there's a massive increase in anxiety. But my question really is about what's planned in terms of support for CAMS services and for children on the waiting list to make sure that we kind of meet the demand, the increased demand.
Yeah, it's such a big question, and you're absolutely right. I think there's two pandemics running here. One is COVID, and one is mental health. And I think there was a growing issue with children's mental health pre-pandemic, but I think it's got a whole lot bigger in the last 18 months, and it's kind of only revealing itself now fully, I think. And I speak with some knowledge of this from my own sort of situation. So absolutely, I fully understand what you're saying, and you're right. The waiting times have gone much bigger all of a sudden, because the number of young people referred has increased massively over the last year. So it's a real issue, and we are absolutely aware of it. We had been putting more money into children's mental health pre-pandemic, and we have taken decisions to put more in to support the service at the moment. I think the answer lies in more prevention as well, though, not necessarily just meeting all of this through statutory mental health services. It's about counselling in schools. It's about other options for young people as well. We did launch digital services. Now, I know they're not a full replacement at all, but they are used by young people. There's a service called Couth. I don't know if you'll be aware of that. Others might not be. It's a digital service that young people can use, and it is heavily used. So we're conscious that there's a huge need here, and we're doing the best that we can. This is where the kind of the catch-ups are. Kevin Collins, I think, when they didn't accept his recommendation to put all of that money into young people's catch-up, I think that was a really bad decision, because some of that money would have been needed to provide that wider whole child support, to get things, and mental health support. So I think I have a feeling at the moment that everyone's kind of rushed back to trying to get back to normal life, and we've not really processed what we've been through or what the legacy of the pandemic is. And I think it's much bigger than we might like to think, in terms of, illness and people who've kind of become more unwell during the pandemic for one reason or another, people who've kind of lost connection with other people, and isolation has grown, but young people who feel anxious or feel a loss of confidence or feel their life is not on track in the way that it was before. I just think we've got to work through all of these issues in a really kind of sort of systematic way, because they're huge, actually. We have put in place a young person's guarantee to try and connect young people to support of various kinds, and we'll keep working at that. But I can assure you we are aware of the issue. Can I tell you tonight we've got all the funds and the resources to deal with it? Well, no, we haven't, actually. That's why we're trying to think in. I think
it's more funding now, because the funding implies that the expertise and the staff are out there. I think what we find is that there is that difficulty with recruitment as well. So, and again, kind of we'll set up one service in one area, but then another service will set up. And because there's a limited amount of expertise and knowledge and kind of for those specialist roles, it's really hard to recruit and recruit and retrain staff. But in addition to that as well, it is about staff well-being. So kind of we've seen the impact of the pandemic on sort of the physical care nurses, the ICU nurses. There's also that impact on mental health nurses. Yeah. There's also that impact on sort of therapists. But there's also that impact, like I said earlier, on the school staff. And I am really worried about the impact of the schools and all the uncertainty and the school closures on the staff, the well-being of our school staff.
I'm worried about that. I know we've got colleagues from Greater Manchester Fire and Rescue Service tonight, and I've been looking at that in terms of all of those frontline services. I was looking at the fire figures this week, and there's a general kind of wearing down of the front line because of the time that they've all been through. I think it's true in policing. I think it's true of paramedics. It's true of fire. I think people have struggled in their own personal lives for various reasons. They've struggled at work because of the pressure of work. And all of it combined is taking a toll. And I really get this feeling when I speak to colleagues in the NHS, go and speak to NHS staff, they feel this is almost the worst time of it all, with the winter looming and everything. And the attention's not on them anymore. They're just battling with it now, and it's quite lonely battling with it. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. I recognise all of that. But I think we do find that there's a bit of burnout, really, in terms of particularly frontline emergency or very demanding roles at the front line. Staff do need some support for their own well-being as well, because I think they've had such a tough time.
Absolutely, and I know you don't have the magic wand and you can't solve all the issues, but in terms of sort of your role within that, what's your sort of plan in terms of looking at the burnout of the frontline staff, thinking about sort of mental health and that increase? What's your sort of 6-month plan around that, Andy?
Well, we had a resilience hub in Greater Manchester. I don't know if you know about that. For those who don't, this was after the Manchester Arena attack, which was a sort of central place where people could get well-being advice and support if they were struggling. And I'm pretty confident that's now been made available to all NHS staff in Greater Manchester, so people can contact that expert team for help. But there's more other initiatives. This issue is recognised, I can assure you, about the health and well-being of our own staff. And we're, as I say, we're putting in place support like the Resilience Hub and other forms of support. So the issue is understood, absolutely. Whether we've fully got everything yet to help people with it, well, probably not, but we definitely are working on it.
And you're welcome to come and meet some of our young people. We've got some very passionate mental health ambassadors in some of our schools who've got really clear ideas on how their mental health and well-being can be supported, looking at more whole school approaches to mental health and sort of mental health being everybody's business and looking at kind of more social enterprise. So please do come and meet our ambassadors. They're fantastic.
I certainly will. And well done for asking the question, by the way, behind as well.
Does anyone else have questions on this kind of topic, or move on to something different if not? No, right, okay. Do we have Leslie Fair? There we go.
Hello, thank you for the opportunity. Our towns and villages are in decline, with shops and banks closing down to leave empty units. Areas like Prestwich, Monton and Chorlton have created or are building towards success with their local retail and restaurant offerings from independents. What plans or schemes are underway to encourage businesses and entrepreneurs into those empty spaces that we have appearing in this borough, and what support is available to entrepreneurs that might be interested?
So that's another great question, because a number of our councils are beginning to take on some of that redundant space. I know Wigan Council have done that. They bought a shopping centre called the Galleries and made it available to startups and actually young bands, a whole range of uses. Stockport bought the shopping centre there and put it to similar uses. And I think we're kind of recognising that post-pandemic, the need for more sort of co-working space at a sort of town level as opposed to just in the city centre is something we should definitely be doing. We're on with a massive rethink of Stockport Town Centre. It's the first to go really in Greater Manchester, with a support from us at the Greater Manchester level. And it in some ways could help create something of the template for the rethinking town centres in this new era that we're in. And I know Arouge and Oldham Council have plans for Oldham Town Centre. I don't know whether Arouge wants to talk about that, but I think in the area that we're in, there's plans to rethink perhaps some of the retail space that, as you say, isn't going to be needed in the same way anymore. Maybe more of it could be residential, more of it could be put to other employment uses. All of our councils are, in one way or another now, beginning to sort of look at those possibilities. And certainly at the Greater Manchester level, we're providing them with whatever support we can. Yep.
You mentioned about entrepreneurs. So I'm from an enterprising U. And we are commissioned by the GMCA, and I work for the Growth Company. And so we offer fully funded business support for entrepreneurs and sole traders, freelancers and the self-employed. So if you would like to know any more about that, then you can come and speak to me afterwards and I can let you know a little bit more about it.
Oridge, did you want to come in?
Well, yeah, I could. Working. Yeah. Well, I could certainly add to that. I think you're right. And we've had a massive and important opportunity here in Oldham where we have seen a decline in retail, and we've now purchased the Spindle Shopping Centre because it runs right through the heart of the town centre. And we've also established district business hubs with the thought of empowering and encouraging entrepreneurs and providing support for them. But it's a massive, massive concern for town centres across the country. But here I think we have great regeneration plans, and to empower and encourage people, actually, especially the independent quarter, which is the bottom side of Yorkshire Street, is really important. And all those people and those businesses are actually on all our boards, so they're helping shape and direct their local areas. And I think it's a really important thing to do. But I think we've got exciting plans here in Oldham that we'll see come to fruition in the next couple of years.
I think absolutely, and we're going to back Arooj on that. And actually, the towns you mentioned, you know, we've got more and more examples of how you can do it. So Altrincham probably was famously the first, I think, you know, with the Trafford Centre effect about 20 years ago. But then you look at Ramsbottom, and you know they've completely turned around what they offer. And in more and more, there's like places that are beginning to sort of, you know, we're getting a bigger and bigger list of it. But Stockport is the first big one to go, if you like. We've got a mayoral development corporation in Stockport where we're linking the rebuilding of their bus station, creating Stockport interchange, and you know really rethinking the town and creating a lot more, you know, housing, affordable housing in the town centre. And that can link to that workspace and support for small enterprises that you've just heard about. So there's a lot of thought going on this. So definitely plug into the offer from the Growth Company. It's a good one.
Leslie, does that answer your question? Anything else on kind of businesses, development, growth of the area? Virtual audience, you're also welcome to join in if you wish. I do think we've got one last question, if Jane Gibson is here. Jane is there.
Hi Andy.
Got away with that one.
Well, you can ask one question if you want to. Sorry, yeah.
Hi Andy, you okay?
Yeah.
I live in Dobcross, and a year or so ago we petitioned the council successfully to ask them to reduce the road speeds to 20 miles an hour that run throughout the village.
Yeah.
They listened, so it was really positive actually, and they listened, and those roads now are reduced to 20 mile an hour. Whether everyone's sticking to that is another matter.
Yeah.
But my question is, does reducing road speeds where pedestrians and traffic mix to 20 miles an hour, does that factor into your plans, not just for Oldham, but throughout Greater Manchester? Other cities have done that, like Birmingham, and quite a few, I think Wales and Scotland have adopted that as a policy. It's a World Health Organisation policy to reduce the road speeds and all of the benefits that come with that, you know, climate benefits and reduction of casualties on the roads as well. Is that in your plans?
Well, it is, because obviously I'm funding a lot of cycling and walking infrastructure across Greater Manchester, and often that is linked to measures to deal with speed in local communities. The 20 mile an hour is obviously a local council decision, so they will take that decision on speed limits in different residential areas. But no, it's definitely something that we would kind of work in partnership with them on. And as I said before, I mentioned speeding. Terry and the chief are on with looking at what more we can do in that area. There's community speed watch that we're supporting as well. That's had a hit and miss sort of start, but there's more that could be done there. In terms of the benefits, I think principally 20 mile an hour was introduced for safety reasons, for kids crossing the road. But it does have clean air benefits. That's absolutely true as well. It does, and we would not touched on the difficult subject of the Greater Manchester Clean Air Zone, but that is something that we have to do. We've got illegal levels of air pollution in all 10 Greater Manchester boroughs, so we can't, if we're going to prioritise health coming out of the pandemic, we do have to get more serious about all of those things. So road transport is going to change quite significantly in Greater Manchester over the coming years, partly linked to the effect of the Clean Air Zone, but also what we've done with cycling and walking. Chris Boardman has proposed side road zebra crossings. I don't know if you've seen this. We've piloted these, which are common in other countries, where you have crossings right near the junction in a side road because they're actually a safe place to cross because traffic is already slowing. and evidence says that, that more of those will help create that climate of car not dominating people's communities. I think the car does dominate too many of our communities, particularly areas where you might have sort of, say, terraced housing and cars parked on the street. It's not a safe environment at all for kids, and you get a backlash from some people when you do these things. But I absolutely think we should be prioritising pedestrian safety. So we are going to see big changes. We've not talked about transport tonight, Hannah, but that is the big focus, if you like, in terms of what I'm spending more of my time on than anything at the moment. We are putting buses under public control. We are going to integrate them with the trams. We are going to introduce what we call a London-style public transport system, and I think that can improve the environment as well at that very neighbourhood level. Quieter buses as we electrify them, cleaner buses. All of it, I think, could significantly lift the livability of our communities. So it's all been done in partnership with the councils, but, people can be cynical about things about times, or will we ever see change? Will we not? With roads and road transport and transport more broadly, there is a huge amount of change coming to Greater Manchester. And I think it's a big opportunity, actually, to make our communities safer and better places to live.
Given that you've just brought it back to transport, I think Gary in the virtual audience has a transport-related question again.
I do, actually. Since the last session in Bury, I brought up the issue of the Eccles line, and still nothing has been done to resolve the overcrowding in the morning and the afternoon peak. I mean, you try to convince people to ditch their cars and use public transport. What we have on the Eccles line each and every day is people being packed in like sardines on single trams every 12 minutes. Why? I emailed Metrolink. I asked them when are they going to bring back, more frequent services, and I'm being told, nothing in the pipeline. What is being done? You are responsible for Metrolink, Andy. What are you doing about it?
Well, I've ordered more trams for a start off, and they were late being delivered because of the pandemic, but they are being delivered. Slowly but surely, and Bob Morris from TFGM could pick up that point. We are doing whatever we can, but the point you made before about antisocial behaviour is an issue, because sometimes trams are being taken out of commission because of the damage that they sustain. More broadly, we've had to put more double trams on our very busiest lines, and the Eccles line isn't our busiest line. The Bury Altrincham line is the busiest line. So, we're trying to match resources as best we can to the need that we've got. But Bob, is there anything more that we can say with regard, because that was raised last time. You were absolutely right, and it is an ongoing issue.
Hi, Gary. Yes, it is an issue. We spoke last month about it. We only have a finite resource. The number of trams we have, we spread them as best we can to match the demand. Eccles line has been one of those that, if you take the portion of line from Cornbrook to Media City, it's very busy. Everybody's crammed on. But the rest of the line is quiet. Whereas the Oldham Rochdale line, it tends to be busy coming down from Shore all the way into town. So this morning, travelling in from Oldham into the town centre, singles, and they were full. It wasn't crammed, but they were full. Now, so do we prioritise Eccles over the Oldham Rochdale line? The answer is we do both, and we spread it round. So
the answer is more trams, though, Bob. So could you just give Gary an indication of when we're going to get the full delivery of those?
So we've ordered another 27 trams with the money Andy managed to find down the back of the sofa. Number 14 of those 27 arrived in the country last weekend and will be in service within another week. Unfortunately, we've been told there's further supply problems. Global shortage of aluminium now is the latest, affecting the doors, so they'll be delayed by another 6 weeks. So it will be late summer, early autumn before we get right through the remainder of the 27.
I mean, all I can say at the end of the day is we are crammed on like sardines every single day. It's not healthy. COVID is still not gone away, and we're squashed in every single day.
I think we had another comment on transport down here as well.
Yeah, just to go back to the clean air zone.
Oh, well, let's deal with that first, and then we'll come to you very last. Yeah.
With regards to people going on, a plea to the public, and we do try to do our best, is to please wear a mask when you're on public transport, not just Metrolink. The more people that wear masks, the better it will be.
Speaking to relatives who are self-employed and some are coming up to retirement, don't want to buy new vans. DVLA say they're safe, VOSA says they're safe, their MOT says they're safe. You're now decided to say their vans aren't safe, they have to pay a charge every day. How's that fair to the self-employed who go out there every day, work their arse off, they don't get sick pay, they do the best, they come on with a paycheck, don't work, they don't get paid, and now you're whacking on top of them nearly £3,000 a year. That's not fair.
So it's not quite as you say all about me, because the government has mandated us to introduce. Well, no, sorry, they have. I mean, you've got to be factual. The government. We've been all councils. Just let me answer your question. The government has instructed all of our councils to take action to reduce illegal air pollution. So that's a legal instruction. Okay, so there are different ways of doing it, but all councils have to take action because they've all received that mandate. And our judgment is that if you just have it in part of a borough or not in all of a borough, that creates unfairness between some communities and others. But at the same time, you'll only displace the problem because people will avoid the clean air, the zone, and then they'll take the pollution into another, and then you'll have to extend it anyway. So we've no real choice if we're going to deal. Hear me out. If we're going to deal with the problem.
Tell that to the self-employed.
Well, I'm about to answer your question on the second point about
Tell that to them. Because they're the ones who are going to get hit
but there's
with
a balance here. We've just been talking about children's safety before. And
Yeah, and there's a
tell
road
that to
called
families
Broadway.
who live in streets where...
That's excluded from it because it's owned by highways, and that's the busiest and probably the dirtiest road in Oldham in terms of the borough. That's excluded because it's part of highways. So people can cut through the motorway, cut down Broadway, cut back join on the motorway and exclude
okay, let me answer that question as well then. So you're right. Highways England roads are not in, and again that was a government decision that not to put them in. But the effect of that, the fact that the motorway network and roads run by Highways England are not in, means that traffic that should be on those roads might have an incentive to stay on those roads rather than cutting through our estates and our areas, which they currently do. Greater Manchester has a real problem with traffic that is coming through our area, cutting off motorway networks, going through residential areas when it shouldn't be doing that. And the effect of the clean air zone could be to keep the right traffic on the right roads, because some of that traffic would attract the charge if it was to come off. But to answer your second point, there is financial support. It will open in the new year for those people who have those vans. And I was looking at the figures yesterday. Unlike London, we will allow them to keep the resale value of their van. In London, when people did the scrappage scheme, the van had to be taken completely out of the commission. We're not doing that. We're letting people sell their van, and then they can access £4,500 to top up the money they get from selling the van to add up to buy a new one. And the point is, cleaner vans are often cheaper to run. They cost less in terms of fuel. And so consequently, the running costs can be lower. So we're going to work to make this add up for people. But the truth of the matter is, we have been instructed to do it, but we're not happy anyway that there's communities in Greater Manchester that are just clogged up with air pollution that's damaging kids' health. Why is that a good thing? Why do we say that's an acceptable state of affairs? It shouldn't be.
Well, the congestion charge in London hasn't reduced the levels of pollution. It's charged in London, it still hasn't.
You think you're confusing two things. There's a congestion charge in London, and there's an ultra low emission zone, and they're two different. They're two different things.
The gentleman next to you has a question.
Yeah, Andy, I'm well aware of that. It is the government, what you're saying, the clean air, yeah, because the Clarity took him to court and the government lost.
Correct.
So I agree with you there, yeah, because I've been working on clean air. Me and you have spoken on clean air many times.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but 493 square miles, that's your idea, or the Greater Manchester, or all councils put together, yeah? And in Birmingham, it's only 5 square mile. Why 493 square miles?
Because there's illegal air pollution in all 10 Greater Manchester boroughs. So the problem is not a city centre problem alone, because of the fact that the motorway system cuts through nearly all of our boroughs, and because that traffic is coming off the system, is cutting through, we've got congestion and pollution in all 10 Greater Manchester boroughs. And consequently, all of them have had a legal instruction from the government to take action to reduce air pollution, to cut air pollution as that results from road traffic. And the judgment is, if you were to have a zone in part of a borough but not all of a borough, you would basically send the non-compliant traffic through the area where the zone wasn't compliant, and you'd make the pollution problem worse in areas, and it wouldn't deal with the whole problem. So that is the answer to your question.
Yeah, all what you said, the government and all that, I agree with you. But it's I've spoken to transport ministers, Grant Shapps I've spoken to Andrew Stevenson, Pendleton, he's a minister as well, a lot of MPs. Putting congestion charges, that's your idea, sir.
No.
To do with government.
No, it's not a congestion charge.
Congestion tax charge.
It's not, because, it's not, because it's different. A congestion charge, this is the confusion that was just made by the gentleman next to you. It's a different thing. A congestion charge is a charge to use the roads. So whichever vehicle you're in, it could be the cleanest vehicle in the world, you'll still be charged by the London congestion charge zone, because it's a charge to take your car. Hear me out, because it's really important, that is what it is. The ultra-low emission zone, or in our case the clean air zone, is basically a fine system in that the minute you're compliant, there is no charge. So when it's succeeded, there will be no revenue coming into the Greater Manchester Clean Air Zone, because the intention of it is to encourage people to change to a compliant vehicle so they pay no charge. And it's a very different thing from a congestion charge. It's not a congestion charge. There won't be one when I'm mayor. Simple as that.
I'm going to give the final point to Jane, who raised the clean air issue in the first place and started this whole debate. Anything else that you want to say? We've just got a few minutes left.
It's linked back to what Andy said about he didn't personally think there were enough speed cameras, and it's linked into the 20 mile an hour zones. Maybe the police could answer this one as well, about compliance with speeding on roads as well. You know, what are their plans with the new police staff to have more visibility on roads, increase the number of speed cameras, and if there are reductions in speed to encourage more people to walk and cycle, how are those reductions in speed going to be monitored, and are they going to be enforced or monitored more than they are?
Well, that's the intention. I mean, it's the review we've asked Terry to do. I've said to the new Chief Constable when he came in that I wanted more focus on it, because if you take an issue like driving without insurance, I consider that to be quite a serious crime, because you are very much putting other people's kind of whole circumstances at risk. If there's a situation where someone drives and there's no insurance, but actually I think it's often linked to other forms of criminality as well. So if you are tougher on that form of crime, I think you can often apprehend people who may be involved in other things. And I'm pretty confident in saying that there is going to be more use of not just speed cameras, but automatic number plate recognition around to start to identify the vehicles that are going around Greater Manchester without insurance. We should be much tougher on them than we have been, in my view. And that's the spirit with which we're doing this. Terry comes from a force, Lancashire, that's always had a much more assertive approach to road policing than traditionally Greater Manchester ever had, and there is a big difference. You'll notice the difference if you drive between the two in terms of the number of speed cameras. Now, yeah, some of this is difficult, but I think definitely we should do it. Our roads are not safe enough, and I think through the pandemic we saw an increase in speeding. You've probably seen it in your communities. Cars really ripping through. We've got to get on top of that kind of thing. It's intimidating behaviour. It ruins people's sense of security in their own community, and we've got to get tougher on it.
Thank you very much. I think it is 1 minute to 9, so we'll wrap it up there. Thank you all. We can have a chat afterwards. I don't think I'm sure we can have a chat afterwards, but at this point, it's 1 minute to 9. We've got to wrap it up, and
I'll answer the question.
Okay.
I'll answer the question. Don't worry.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brown.
Sorry.
Thanks for the opportunity. I'm talking to you about an interview we had with Sam Jacks on BBC Today, where you were quoted as saying, or quoted, Mr. Burnham Mr Burnham began to criticise the older generation and claimed that they had not contributed anything regarding social care. He said the older generation today never paid for social care through their taxes. That is why we have a problem. I want you to quantify that to me. I'm 80-year-old and I know what I paid in to social care over my working life. Where do you get this statement from?
Okay, that's a fair question, and I don't mind answering it. So the answer is, when the post-war welfare state was created and national insurance was brought in to pay for the NHS, social care was never part of that settlement. You asked me a question. I need to, well, let me answer you. Pick me up when I've answered your question. Otherwise, we'll get nowhere. So social care wasn't included. So why did my grandmother have to sell her home and everything she had, every single penny? Because that protection wasn't there. The welfare state, wait a second, hear me out. She didn't get social care free, as people haven't done in this country with savings above £23,000, because social care was not included in the package. Therefore, people in this country have been exposed to care charges and at risk of losing their home, and that has been debated in Parliament this week. So that is what the statement relates to, and it's just the way it's been. And in my view, it shouldn't be like that. We should have brought social care into the welfare state, and in my view, it should be provided on NHS terms. But that is the statement, and it is factually correct.
When I was young, social care in this town was paid through council tax. The council ran the... through the council tax, that paid for the care homes, for the, we used to call them old people's homes.
Yeah.
It was paid for then, and I paid my taxes then. I paid my council tax. I'm 80-year-old. I've been paying my council tax for 60 years. I've paid full council tax for 60 years, and before it was privatised and they knocked all the social care homes down, it was paid for by the council. I paid my taxes. So under that, can you tell me why you make this statement that I haven't paid taxes for social care?
No, I have just explained it.
No, you haven't.
I have explained it.
Well, I've explained
it. But why do you think we've had a...
I paid my taxes for it.
But let me just explain again. Why have we had a debate in this country for the last 30 years about people being forced to sell their homes to pay for care? The reason why we've had that debate is because there hasn't been a provision whereby everybody gets their social care paid for free at the end of their life. That is just the way it's been, and there's a raging political debate about it for that very reason.
And it's a raging political debate that we could keep going, but we are now over our time. I'm really sorry, we have only got the building for a certain amount of time, so we're going to have to leave.
Your question.
So thank you, everybody. I'm really sorry. I am really sorry, but at this point we do have to leave. It is 9:03, and we have got to get out of here. So thank you, everyone, for coming along. Thank you for joining in virtually, and yeah, see you next time. Thank you.
Thanks.